Today we're going to talk a little bit about resumes and transitioning from the military. A resume is nothing but a sheet of paper that gives a lot of information about you to somebody else that has no idea what you do. You cannot assume that anybody knows what you do for a living, especially in the military, because after all, only 1% of the United States has ever served in some way or some form of fashion in the military. So you cannot assume that an HR who is reading your resume has any idea what that's about. Now noted, HRs do a lot of reading of resumes, so there are things that they learn to pick up on. However, the ATS programs that they use do not always pick up on those things. A lot of times what I tell people when they're trying to figure out how to write their own resume when it's going through the ATS programs is to look at the job description. Make sure that they have trigger words from that job description in the actual resume itself. Now, I get it. Everybody's been told when they leave the military that they should write their own resume and here's the great tips and format it just like this, but that is actually not true at all. There is no real major way to format except for certain guidelines that need to be used at all times. Certain guidelines like margins, the lettering, the coloring, don't use text boxes. When all that uploads to an ATS program, it becomes an extremely difficult task for those programs to read. And most companies build their own in-house, therefore you cannot assume one is the same. PDF downloads are okay, but that's only if you're directly emailing it to somebody. Other than that, you always need to use Microsoft Documents or else it won't translate into their programs correctly. Like Page documents for Mac, don't ever use those. I love Mac products, I use them all the time, but I can never send a document that way. Now if you do use a Mac and you have Pages and you translate it into a Word doc, it'll usually mess up. So you need to make sure you're using something like Google Drive on your Mac to make sure it translates properly. And if you don't know, double check it, okay? Okay, so there's the issue with that. We need to talk about transitioning. When you go through TAPS programs, they tell you a lot of things. They overload you, and at the end, they toss in a little sprinkle about your resume. Do not assume that you can write it on your own. I talk to so many people that waste so much of their time trying to figure it out. They get frustrated, confused. They don't end up, by the time they're done, they have no idea what they want to do. The biggest thing you need to ask yourself is don't look at the resume, don't look at everybody else's they're doing. You need to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. It has nothing to do with what somebody else wants to do. You need to be able to look at your skills that you've learned, your natural stated skills and hobbies that you like to do on the other side, and utilize those to see what direction you want to go. Once you've done that, you need to talk to a professional that deals with resumes, so that way you're able to say, hey, this is what I want. I do it all the time for free. I don't charge people to critique their resume. They call me, they send it to me, and I say, hey, this is the route maybe you need to go based on what you're telling me that you want to do. You don't have to pay somebody to do something like that. Yes, you may have to pay for your resume to be updated and developed for you, but that's different. I pay people to do all kinds of things. I don't dry clean my own clothes. I don't wash my own car. I wish I didn't have to clean my own house. That would be nice, but I do. So things like that, you really want to make sure you're hiring a professional. I don't go out to combat and start shooting people. I would need a whole lot of training, a whole lot of mental capacity, and lots of other things, and probably gained about 50 pounds because I'm a little rail. So the biggest point is when you're dealing with your resume, don't assume you can just do it on your own. That is a very false thought process, and you're actually harming yourself by not reaching out to others and asking for professional assistance. Now, when you do reach out to people, check their reviews, look on their websites, look on their LinkedIn profiles, reach out to other people, see who they've used, and see what's successful. A lot of times people are just going to give you what they want you to hear, give you the cookie cutter format for a resume, and that's not going to do you any good. There are a lot of companies out here that are very large, that do things for free for the military, and I always know when those resumes come across my desk. They all look exactly the same, they're all worded exactly the same, and I can always tell you what company it comes from based on that. The problem with that is they're still not translating what you do for a living. You can't do that. I can understand what you've done for a living. I can read an eval and understand it. Great. But you're sending it to a corporate world where they don't understand those things, and you cannot assume they do. Everything has to be translated. That's the biggest problem here. Translation and transition kind of go together. You have to learn the skills and how to create the resume in order to make you successful for the next job. Now, when you're dealing with your resume and then you're trying to upload it to LinkedIn, be sure your LinkedIn profile matches exactly the resume that you have. I know people like to make 6 or 7 of them and send them out, but what ends up happening is you're diluting yourself because you're doing that on your own, and you still, again, don't understand what these programs are looking for to download, meaning the ATS programs, and what HR is looking for. They cannot understand what you did for a living, period. Combat readiness is the most common word that I see in a resume. No corporate American company understands that whatsoever unless they're working in contracting. And even combat readiness, does any of you really know what that means? It's a very long definition. Combat means a lot of things. Readiness means a lot of things. But what level are you ready on? Were you a Navy SEAL? Were you a Ranger? Were you in MARSOC? Or everything. So you see what I'm saying? Their readiness level is different than anybody else's. They're not the same. They're very specific. Were you a pilot? Were you a mechanic? Were you an engineer? Do you see what I'm saying? So you cannot use blank, what am I trying to say? Not blank rated, but just, not random words. Help me out, people. I know you're all trying to tell me right now what word I'm looking for. Generic words to just throw in there because you understand it, but really you don't. You need to make sure you put all meat in there. Words like combat readiness, you just wasted a really long part of the piece of paper because it looks like this on a sheet of paper. You don't need it, okay? That's not what you want to say. Define combat readiness in 2 words. Strategically, all the kinds of, strategically great. What did you strategically do? I'm an SME in what? What are you an SME in, and how did you get to that place? When you deal with the bullet points in a resume, don't go over more than 4 unless you are completely awesome or you've been there for a really long time. And when you use those things, don't just tell me what you did. Give me facts. If you created growth, give me a percentage. I created and developed a software that made us awesome. What's the name of the software? What did you do with it? How long did it take to produce it? What was the percentage in growth that you made with that software? You've got to be detailed, and you've got to do it in a short amount of time. Fluff in an eval cannot be in a resume. It will get thrown out, and you'll be very frustrated. One of the biggest things that I deal with when people are getting frustrated is I'm not getting callbacks. If you're not getting callbacks, then your resume needs to be dealt with, period. And a lot of times, too, that just because somebody doesn't call you back every 5 minutes or tell you didn't get the job, don't get your feelings hurt. They're busy just like you, okay? And I've had people that don't hear from people for almost 3 months, and they call them, they get the job, and they're good to go. Sometimes companies have delays, budget changes, and all sorts of different things that are going to create a different issue for them, but they're still working on it, okay? I had a girl recently who it took 3 months for her resume to get reviewed. They had 900 different candidates, and she got the job. She got very frustrated thinking she wasn't going to get it, but she did. So you've got to be patient. But again, don't keep going back on your own and start editing your own resume. You will start breaking it down and tearing it down. Now, when people send me their resumes after they've tried to do them on their own, a lot of times they've already broken it down and it's torn down so much. I always tell them, throw everything in. Give me all your fluff. It's like a story for me, because when I can read your story and talk to you, I know how to put it into translations from there and ask you the questions like, okay, you were in charge of a team of how many when you were in Iraq? Okay, great. So you were in charge of this many guys. What did you do there? Okay, and we know how to translate that. Were you in comms? Did you deal with a budget? How much was the budget? What was the budget for? Okay, see, all these things matter. When you can show that you have an admin side budget and all these multitasking things, because that's what's done in combat for most of the people that go. You have multiple things that you're doing, but you're only putting them in there as a small little blip of what you really need to explain to everybody else. Now, when you get into an interview, if you finally get there, please dress professionally and don't wear a suit that's like 10 years old. I know that sounds terrible, but I'm being honest. Please groom yourself. You don't have to have the beard anymore. It will be fine. Trim it off, glue it to a little sheet of paper, and you can wear it later if you want to. Maybe I should get one. Just kidding. So, when you get into an interview, speak slowly. I talk really fast in general. I'm probably talking too fast today. I'm sorry. But the thing is you always want to look somebody in the eye. You always want to be calm. You always want to be very honest, but clear. And when I say honest and clear, the reason I say that is because you don't need to tell them all the negative things. The biggest goal from your resume and your interview is to show that you have potential to bring growth to that company and that you can understand and cultivate their culture, because every company has a culture. I don't care what anybody says. Everybody has a way of doing things, and if you don't look like you're going to be a good fit, it's not going to work. Now, there is a million different ways you can dress for an interview these days, so I'm not going to say wear a three-piece suit. I'm not. A lot of times I wear dress slacks and a blouse, and that's about it, because it gets a little hot and I'm going nonstop. And a lot of times in the summer, I'll just wear a nice, dress that's very professional, but that's for a woman. For a man, a lot of times you can just wear nice fitted dress slacks, a button down. Please don't have one with a pocket. That drives me insane. You shouldn't wear a shirt with a pocket that looks like a professional button down because it just looks odd. I'm sorry, go throw them all in the garbage. I still don't know why people have them. We don't put pins in our pockets anymore. We put our phones in our pockets and we roll on, okay? When you get into the interview, make sure that your attire looks great. Make sure you present them with a quality handshake, eyes looking at them, and compliment them on something during that handshake. Once you're seated, let them have the floor. When you're answering your questions, try not to exceed 60 seconds with answering it. They're going to get bored. They just need you to get to the point. If they ask you about combat stories, please do not get to cussing and sharing overly, okay? They want to hear those cool things. Find one good story that you can think of and utilize it and practice it so that way it sounds unique, specific to you, how you overcame something and got something from point A to point B, but you're not overdoing it and you're not sharing things that might make them uncomfortable. Like rebar through the ear, nobody needs to know that. Just leave it to yourself or save it for beer night when everybody goes to McBee's, okay? You just don't have to tell people those things, at least not before you get hired. If you do get hired, keep a decorum. You can't come to work in your flip-flops unless they say so. I do not dress like this outside of work. I usually wear cutoff shorts, a tank top, a snapback hat, and flip-flops in the summertime. So people don't recognize me when I leave, but that's how I'm comfortable in the evenings and the afternoons when I'm just relaxing and hanging out with my family, okay? So, attire, be professional. Clean your shoes. I don't care if you got to shine them like you did in the military. Dress slacks. Hopefully they don't have pleats. Those are gone. Please try to stay professional and in the trend. And the reason I say that is because we're in 2018. People running companies are in the 30s bracket and 40s, and they have to stay with that. They want that culture to meet that demand. They want to see that you've got it. And if for guys and girls that are a little bit older, that's okay. But you can go buy a dress slack that's going to be fitted to you, that looks good on you, that's in the 2008 trend. And I know that sounds terrible, and I'm sorry, and I've apologized at least more than once with you, but listen, just take care of yourself, and it'll make you feel more confident when you're in the interview process, and that way you can share with them what you need to share. Practice your resume. If you don't know what's on it, you're not getting the job. I've had so many people that sit there with their resume, and they go into an interview, and they're like, what? Oh, I didn't know that was on there. Really? You have to know it. You need to be able to speak the language of your resume, period. If you can't speak it, I don't care if I helped you write it or wrote it for you, you better read it 10,000 times so you know what you're talking about when you get in there. And if you don't know what something means, call me and ask me, Google, or whoever wrote it, ask them. That is the purest way to be able to perfect yourself, or you can't do it. And the job description as well. Learn it. Learn the company. When you're going in for an interview, you better know who the CEO is, the CFO, the CEO, their assistants, and so forth and so on. You need to know the company, what their profit margins are, what they do for a living, and what your job title is descriptive of, out down to the very bottom, because they're going to ask you about their culture. They're going to ask you the things that you're going to want. They're going to want from you and know about you. They read directly from your resume and the job description when they ask about things and from their company's culture. So if you don't know those things and you're going in blindly and you say, oh, I don't know, yeah, bye. They want you to know. That means you're not bringing something to the table, period. Don't be lax. Don't think you can just roll up in there and you're going to get the job because you've been to war or you've got some fancy awards on there. They don't care. You have to take responsibility for your transition at all times. When you transition from the military, do not wait and assume that you're just going to find a job. You better start 5 years in advance. Put a savings account away, okay? Don't live paycheck to paycheck. Don't buy the shiny new patio furniture. Don't take the trip. All that money you might need, it can often take 6 months to a year to find a job when you transition because you're spinning your wheels and not setting yourself up for success. For those that have already done that and that's where you are, that's okay too. There's ways around that, but that's not what I'm going to talk about right now. I'm talking about setting it up. 5 years in advance, get your savings account going. Get yourself into shape. If you don't have a degree, Use it. The military pays for it. Start with 2 classes. I don't care how many you do. Get your degrees. And if you've already got a bachelor's, get an MBA. It's so easy these days to get a degree. Okay, so after you have decided to start saving some money and get an education, it just is what it is these days. I'm sorry, we all have to have one. Then you need to start preparing for what do you want to do? Seek it out in you. Ask people. Don't just assume, oh yeah, they're in finance. That is the most popular thing these days. I don't know why, and who's telling everybody that they leave the military, special and special forces, that they all need to go into finance because it's a crock of crap. Finance is a very tough market. You have to sweat, be poor, starve, and just eat the world to get there. That's money, I get it. But there's something that you can do specifically better than anybody else. Utilize your skills, okay? Don't try to be what everybody else is trying to be because you're going to end up harming yourself. When you go in and start checking for who I'm going to be, who I want to be, you need to make sure that you're being accountable to yourself for the things you may be denying to yourself. Because during a transition, a lot of times people will deny to themselves that this is happening and that everything's going to fall into place. It's okay to start your resume 12 months out. I have guys and girls that do it all the time. We do it, we prepare it, and you know what? They start applying for jobs. And I say, do it, because you can go and interview. Practice makes perfect in life. I tell people to practice with a friend. Have them drill you in interview questions, because you all get nervous. I get nervous. I'm in front of the camera right now, and I mean, I get a little nervous too, because what if I mess up? I don't want to start this thing over. I want to be able to keep going to get everything informed to you that I'm trying to get informed to you today. So practice makes perfect in an interview. If you are, we have a train, he's loud. Shh. Where are we? 12 months out. Okay, so when you start reaching the 6 months out, that's when you can really start actively preparing yourself and applying for jobs. And it's okay to tell people I'm 6 months out, you know, because like I said, sometimes it takes 3 months for them to hire, and so that's all right. And if you don't get the job, that's okay. Networking when you're interviewing and preparing, you can start that even 5 years out. Go ahead and build up your network, start learning people. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, networking is not the only way to get a job, and I'm kind of tired of people telling you that. It is not true, because what happens is if you only network, if you only apply for jobs, if you don't have somebody help you with your resume, if you don't prepare for an interview, it all works together. You have no idea how you're going to get your next job. Zero clue. So don't assume it's only networking. Don't assume it's from Joe Schmo down the road. Don't assume it's your fabulous resume. Don't assume that it's your demure good looks, and don't assume those things. You have to be doing all of them and make a balanced chart. I tell everybody that's in the middle of a transition, make a long-term goal list. Execute a little bit of that each and every day so you're moving forward. Build a little bit. Don't just read and research. You're going to get frustrated. Don't just try to build your own resume. You're going to get frustrated. Don't just practice interview skills. Don't just run around all over town at these job fairs and blah, blah. I mean, there are so many job fairs these days. I get kind of bored, because what are we doing? They're selling you something. They're selling you something. You come, they have your resume. Come on. They are great. All these things are great, but don't assume it's for you to get hired. Use these things to make you better, and then when the right job comes and you land it, that's how you land it, okay? You cannot assume it. I have so many people that get their hopes up because they're going to a job fair and that's where I'm going to get it. Well, you're defeating yourself. Go with high hopes, making sure you're taking something away, and if the right opportunity comes, it comes. But that may not be the best fit for you. So why would you even want to assume that that's the route you want to go? Okay, so where are we at? I didn't write notes. I'm just all coming from up here. So we're doing well-rounded networking. There we go. So networking is not the only way. Please get somebody to help you with your resume. I don't care who it is. It does not have to be me. Please practice your interview skills. Please know what you want to do for a living. Please get some good clothes and groom yourself and shave the beards. And ladies, just put on some light makeup. Don't go without makeup. I know a lot of you don't like to wear it, but please wear it, okay? Just a little bit. I don't wear a lot, just a little bit. Fix your hair, all those kinds of things. Don't wear a lot of jewelry. No big hoops earrings. You be dangling. It's like you're partying in there. Boop, boop, boop. Just kidding. All right, I have tattoos. This can be a problem with companies. I used to live on the West Coast and Hawaii for about 10 years. Nobody cared. I now live back in Memphis, Tennessee, and I go to functions all the time, and they all care. Lovely. I don't. But I have to respect that decorum. So thankfully, I can cover them with a watch and a light bracelet, and then we're done. Okay? So those are some other things to consider when you're heading into the interview process. As you're prepping and preparing and starting to apply for jobs and you're branding yourself, get out there and network. Ask questions. But don't just network to assume that's how you're landing the job. And don't assume you're only getting one job. Allow yourself to grow and learn in the process so that way you become who you're supposed to be and you get the advancement that you need. When it comes to salary, please don't assume that you're going to come out making what you're making right now. Sometimes that becomes a hard feat because if you come out and you were making, say, 150 grand because you're over there in Hawaii and you've got all this extra pay and all this kind of special pay for diving and all this kind of quals, that doesn't mean anything in the real world. They have to know that you transition well. So you may take a pay cut. Not all the time. I see it all the time where people get amazing jobs and they end up making more. But you have to be realistic with yourself to note, don't assume because you're making 150 right now, you're going to make 150 out the gate. You're starting a new career. You're starting over. You cannot assume these things. And I'm not here to hurt your feelings about those things, but it's realistic. We can never assume that we're just going to get everything. We can't assume that we're just going to, we can't get all upset with ourselves because we don't. And for all that I am worth, please do not post on LinkedIn why you're so upset about why people haven't reached out to you and networked to you or called you back. That's a pity party. And it's okay to have one, but have it in private, not on professional forum. When I see those things, I get a little annoyed. I have pity parties too. I cry about crap. I get weak and feel like a failure like everybody else. But guess what? Nobody knows about it on social media, and half my family doesn't know either, or my friends, because I keep it to myself because I figured I'll get over this tomorrow, so I might as well just keep on going. Failure is inevitable in a transition. You know why? You have no idea what you're doing. Period. When I start something new or I have an idea about something, I'm like, I'm gonna do that. Like this webinar, I don't know how to do these. I had to Google and make sure it was a webinar. And I'm being dead serious with you because I knew what they were, but I wanted to make sure that when I use the word webinar, is it really what it is? Is that going to be live? Can you pre-record them? I wanted to make sure and know because I don't want to use something that I'm not doing right, okay? And I'm not even going to edit this. We're just going to roll with it because I figured, why not? I already forgot what I was telling you because I went off on a tangent. Oh, pity parties online and failure. Failure's going to happen, okay? We've all failed. That's the difference in failing and quitting are two things. Number one, if you quit, ring out. You can't go back. You can't continue to press on, okay? If you fail and you roll over to the next class, you can try again. Do you see what I'm saying? Do not quit and don't think that failure is not going to happen. You don't know what you're doing. So failure is going to happen, but failure is, one of those things that it creates strength in you. It teaches you how to grow, and it allows you to be a better version of yourself so you get to that goal. You learn something in failure. Failure is, can be portrayed as something that it's not. Failure is not quitting. Heck, people go broke all the time, and they keep pressing on. How many millionaires and billionaires have you seen that have filed bankruptcy and come back? Did they quit or did they fail? They failed at something. And you know what? They learned a lot, and they picked themselves up off the floor, and they kept going. And that's why they're millionaires, because they didn't quit. They just understood that, hey, that's a failure. Chalk it up. I'm going to learn something from it, and I'm going to move on. Nobody gets to where they're going in life by not having a lot of failures, or at least some. Yes, there's some that just everything's handed to them, but you know what? That's a whole different ballgame, and that's not where we're going. In a transition, you don't know what you're doing, so you're going to have failures. So go ahead and just add those into your little goal list. I'm going to have a failure. What am I going to do to deal with it? How am I going to learn from it? What am I going to do to fix it? And how am I going to change those things so I make sure that I am successful in my transition for myself, my family, or whoever is involved, okay? What else do we want to touch on today? I do have some notes. I think we're going to end there for now. I've talked enough. Appreciate you stopping by. Bye.